At the annual Rose Festival, the streets were alive with music, food stalls, and brilliant colors. Emily walked beside her husband, their fingers interlaced, the crowd bustling around them. For once, she felt like they looked like any ordinary couple, enjoying a simple day together. But the illusion shattered in a heartbeat. When Daniel spotted a familiar figure in the distance, his hand slipped from hers without hesitation. He rushed forward, steadying another woman, his first love, Claire. Left behind, Emily's hand hung awkwardly in the air, her heart hollow, surrounded by strangers' pitying glances. In that moment, she understood she had never truly been chosen. Emily once believed that marriage was meant to be a safe harbor, a place where two souls could anchor through storms and tides. When she married Daniel, she thought she had found that sanctuary. Their wedding had been modest, tucked away in a small church with friends and family gathered in warm smiles. She didn't mind the simplicity. She told herself love mattered more than chandeliers or champagne. 5 years later, she wondered if she had been naive. On paper, she was his wife, the mother of his child, the woman who managed every detail of their household. She kept the bills paid, the fridge full, and their little boy cared for. She remembered anniversaries, bought gifts for his parents, and made excuses when he didn't show up for family dinners. Outwardly, she was the wife everyone admired. Inwardly, she was invisible, because in Daniel's heart there had always been someone else. Her name was Claire. She had been his college sweetheart, the kind of girl people described as ethereal, fragile as glass, untouchable, unforgettable. She had moved away years ago, but her shadow never left. Whenever her name surfaced, Emily saw Daniel's eyes soften, saw a trace of longing flicker there. It was a look Emily had never earned, no matter how hard she tried. Still, she endured. She told herself that if she poured enough of her heart into their marriage, if she sacrificed enough, he might one day turn toward her fully. She gave up her career as an event planner, shelving her passion for design and creativity to raise their son and care for Daniel's aging parents. She told herself this was love, choosing family over ambition, choosing duty over self. But the cracks were there, widening year after year. On their third wedding anniversary, she had cooked his favorite meal, lit candles, and waited at the table until the wax burned low. Daniel never came home. He had been working late, though later she overheard a colleague mention he'd been helping Claire move apartments. On their son's second birthday, Daniel disappeared halfway through the party, citing urgent business. Emily discovered later that he had driven across town to deliver medicine to Claire, who had called him just in case. Each slight, each abandonment, Emily swallowed in silence. She convinced herself that strength meant patience, that being a good wife meant forgiving. She even learned to smile through the sting, telling herself that at least she had his name, his house, his child. She clung to what she had, because admitting the truth that she was never his first choice would mean shattering the life she'd built. So, when Daniel suggested they go to the Rose Festival together, Emily's heart leaped. It had been years since they'd walked side by side anywhere, much less in public. She saw it as a chance, a fragile thread she could weave into hope. That morning, she dressed with care, wrapping a soft pink scarf around her neck, choosing earrings Daniel once said looked nice on her. She braided her hair loosely, letting a few strands fall like petals around her face. As she looked in the mirror, she whispered, "Maybe today will be different." And for a while, it was. The streets buzzed with music, vendors calling out, children laughing as they carried balloons. Daniel's hand was warm in hers, their son skipping ahead with a toy pinwheel. Emily allowed herself to breathe, to imagine that this was what love could look like: ordinary, simple, shared. She smiled as they paused to admire stalls bursting with roses, tulips, and lilies. Yet, beneath that fragile warmth was an unspoken truth. A truth Emily didn't yet see, but already felt in the pit of her heart, that this moment of togetherness was a fleeting illusion. The hand she clutched so tightly was never truly hers to keep. It would only take a second, a single glance, for everything to fall apart. The Rose Festival was alive with energy couples weaving through rows of stalls, children laughing with faces painted, vendors calling out the price of bouquets. Emily's hand was snug in Daniel's, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe this might be a turning point. Maybe he had chosen to bring her here because he wanted to reconnect. Maybe, just maybe, their marriage could still be salvaged. But then she noticed his gaze shift. Daniel's eyes locked on something, or rather, someone in the distance. His grip slackened almost imperceptibly, like a rope slipping through fingers. Emily turned her head and saw her, Claire. She looked exactly as Emily remembered from the photos tucked in Daniel's old albums, delicate, almost fragile, a porcelain doll in human form. Her long hair caught the sunlight, shimmering like silk, and in her arms she carried a bouquet far too heavy for her small frame. She stumbled, nearly dropping it. Before Emily could process, Daniel let go. His hand fell away from hers, as though it had never belonged there. In a heartbeat, he was gone, pushing past the crowd, reaching out with urgency. His voice rose above the noise, filled with tenderness Emily had never heard, directed at her. "Claire. Careful. Are you okay?" Emily stood rooted to the ground, her hand still outstretched, fingers trembling in empty air. Around her, people bustled and bargained, but she only heard the silence of abandonment. Strangers' eyes flickered toward her, some curious, some pitying, and she wished she could vanish into the pavement. Daniel bent over Claire, steadying her by the elbow, taking the bouquet from her arms. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, his expression soft, protective. Emily couldn't remember the last time he had looked at her that way. When he finally turned, noticing Emily's frozen posture a few steps behind, his voice carried no remorse, only irritation. "Why are you just standing there? Come on." Then he turned back to Claire, his tone gentle again. "You really need to be careful. You're too fragile for these crowds." Fragile. The word sliced through Emily like glass. For Claire, fragility was a treasure, a reason to be protected, cherished. For Emily, strength was an excuse to be neglected. He had always told her she was strong, strong enough to manage the house alone, strong enough to raise their child without his help, strong enough to survive his absence. But she knew the truth. Her strength was born from necessity, not choice. It wasn't a gift. It was a wound. They continued through the festival, but together was a cruel lie. Daniel walked beside Claire, carrying her bouquet, his hand hovering protectively at her back. Emily trailed behind, her scarf fluttering in the spring wind, her steps heavy with humiliation. She felt less like a wife and more like a stranger intruding on their reunion. That night, after tucking their son into bed, Emily sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table. The silence between them was suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her voice steadier than she felt. "Why did you let go of my hand?" Daniel didn't even look up from his phone. Claire almost fell. "I couldn't let her get hurt." "You're not like her, Emily. You're strong. You don't need anyone holding you." Her chest tightened, a dull ache spreading through her ribs. His words were not careless. They were conviction. To him, she wasn't someone to protect, but someone to endure. Not a woman to be loved, but a placeholder to carry the weight of his life while he chased shadows. And in that moment, beneath the roof they called home, the fragile hope Emily had clung to at the festival shattered completely. That night, long after Daniel's steady breathing signaled he was asleep, Emily sat alone at the vanity in their bedroom. The lamp cast a faint golden glow across her face, accentuating the hollowness in her eyes. She lifted her hand slowly, staring at it as if it belonged to someone else. It was the same hand that had cooked countless meals, folded mountains of laundry, wiped tears from her little boy's cheeks, and reached for Daniel's hand in moments of desperate hope. Tonight it hung, heavy, empty, abandoned in more ways than one. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, her skin pale from sleepless nights, her smile long forgotten. She whispered to her reflection, "Who are you? A wife? A mother? Or just the stand-in for the woman he never stopped loving?" Memories rushed forward like an avalanche. The night their son burned with fever. She rocked him for hours in the dark, whispering lullabies through her tears. Daniel never came home. Later, she learned he had been across town, driving Claire back from a friend's gathering. On their anniversary, she had prepared his favorite dinner, lit candles, and waited until they melted into pools of wax. He had been working late, though she later saw a photo online Daniel at a coffee shop with Claire, smiling as though the world outside didn't exist. Each memory struck her like a blade. She realized she had swallowed too many betrayals, disguised too many wounds with silence. She thought strength meant patience, that being a good wife meant forgiving endlessly. But all it did was teach him that she could be ignored, replaced, discarded. The image of the festival replayed in her mind like a cruel film, his hand slipping from hers, his body leaning toward Claire, his voice gentle with worry. The sting of strangers' pitying glances returned, burning hotter than fire. It wasn't just humiliation, it was revelation. He had shown her, in the most public way, where she stood in his heart. For the first time in years, anger flared brighter than sorrow. It wasn't reckless rage, was a clean, steady flame that burned away the fog of excuses she had used to justify his neglect. She saw clearly now. She had been waiting for permission that would never come. Permission to leave, to choose herself, to believe she was worth more than scraps. Her gaze fell to the closet, where an old box sat beneath folded linens. She pulled it out, brushing away dust. Inside lay sketches from her career as an event planner, floral designs, seating charts, notes scrawled in the margins. She had buried that life when she married Daniel, convincing herself that motherhood was enough. But as she flipped through the papers, something stirred inside her. Something she thought had died. Passion, purpose, possibility. Her heart thudded with realization. She had sacrificed dreams, dignity, and self-worth for a man who never even held her hand when she needed him most. And yet, she was still alive, still capable of creating, still capable of love, most importantly, of loving herself. She thought of her son. What lesson would he learn if she stayed? That a woman should endure neglect. That love means standing quietly in the shadow of another. She couldn't let that be his truth. He deserved a mother who taught him that love was respect, that strength meant knowing when to walk away. Emily whispered into the silence, "No more." The words trembled at first, then solidified like stone. As dawn's first light seeped through the curtains, Emily tucked the sketches back into the box with care. Tomorrow she would begin again. She would no longer beg for a hand that slipped away. She would hold her own, and that would be enough. The divorce papers were signed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. There were no raised voices, no desperate pleas only, the quiet scratch of a pen across paper, sealing the end of 5 years that had felt more like endurance than love. Daniel didn't resist. He looked surprised, maybe even annoyed, but not devastated. Deep down, Emily knew he assumed she would eventually return, as she always had before. But this time was different. She wasn't coming back. Emily moved into a modest apartment on the edge of town, just 2 bedrooms and a small balcony that overlooked the city skyline. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She painted the walls in soft colors, filled the shelves with books and flowers, and hung her old event sketches above her desk. For the first time in years, her space reflected her, not him. With the help of a few friends, she reignited her career as an event planner. What began as small birthday parties and bridal showers quickly blossomed into bigger opportunities. Her talent, once buried, was undeniable. Clients praised her creativity, her ability to transform ordinary spaces into celebrations full of life. Emily worked late into the night, not from duty, but from passion. Each event was another piece of herself she stitched back together. Meanwhile, Daniel's life began to fray at the edges. Without Emily quietly keeping everything in order, the cracks widened. Bills piled up. The house felt empty, and Claire, his white moonlight, was gone. She had left for another city, another man, another life. The woman Daniel had worshipped had slipped away, leaving him with nothing but regret. One evening, months after the divorce, the bell above Emily's office door chimed. Daniel stood there, a shadow of the man he once was. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes tired. "Emily," he said, his voice low and uncertain. "I made mistakes. I thought you'd always be there." "I didn't realize until now." She didn't let him finish. She lifted a bouquet she had just arranged. White lilies, their petals pure and solemn. "These are 4 farewells," she said gently, placing them in his hands. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Daniel looked at her, perhaps hoping to find the woman who had once waited for him in quiet devotion. But she was gone. The Emily standing before him was different, radiant, whole, untouchable. He left with the lilies, shoulders heavy with the weight of his loss. Emily turned back to her desk, where her son was busy drawing with crayons, humming softly to himself. She smiled. That was her future, not regret, not shadows, but the bright, unshakable love of a child who saw her as his entire world. Weeks later, the Rose Festival returned. Emily walked through it with her son, hand in hand, the stalls bursting with color and music. People around her laughed, bargained, and danced. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt free. She stopped at a stall of fresh roses, buying a bouquet just for herself. As she inhaled their fragrance, sunlight warmed her face. Once, she had been the woman left behind in a crowd, her hand abandoned for another. Now, she was the woman who walked forward without hesitation, hands full of blossoms of her own making. No longer waiting to be chosen, no longer begging to be held. Emily held herself, and that was enough. Emily's journey is more than a story of heartbreak, is a lesson in self-worth. Love is not proven by how much you endure or how long you wait. Love is proven by respect, by presence, by the willingness to hold your hand and never let go. If someone can release you without hesitation, then they were never truly holding you in the first place. For years, Emily believed her strength meant she didn't deserve tenderness. But when she chose herself, she did not lose, she reclaimed. She reclaimed her dignity, her dreams, and the right to be loved in a way that honored her worth. Her liberation was not a defeat, but a beginning, a reminder that sometimes letting go of the wrong hand is the bravest act of love you can give yourself. If you've ever seen yourself in Emily's reflection, remember this: you are not a shadow, not a placeholder, not a backup. You deserve to be the one chosen, the one cherished. Comment, "I choose myself," if you stand with her story. Share this video with someone who needs the reminder that freedom often begins with the courage to walk away.